Let's talk to Bill Browder. He's head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. He was at one time the largest foreign investor in Russia. He worked in Moscow, came face to face with Vladimir Putin on many occasions. But ever since his own lawyer was murdered on Vladimir Putin's instruction, he has made it his mission to oust him from power, and was instrumental in providing the information to the West to launch those economic sanctions on Vladimir Putin and his elite cronies. Bill Browder, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Really good to talk to you. Look, you're one of the very few people who has actually, looked Vladimir Putin in the eye. You know how he ticks. You know what works. What do you believe happened at the weekend when those Wagner Group troops were marching on their way to Moscow and suddenly it was all over? What do you believe happened?
Well, first of all, I should say that this is the single worst thing that's happened to Putin since he came to power 23 years ago. He's a dictator. He's a strong man. He needs to project an image of absolute strength. And this was a humiliation of unparalleled proportions. What you had was a group, what we originally thought was 25,000 soldiers, turns out to be 8,000, that were able to march right in to Rostov, a major Russian city, take over a military base, then go to Voronezh, another city, and then get within 2 hours of Moscow before he turned back. And from what I can tell, the reason why Prigozhin didn't go all the way to Moscow is because some of his co-conspirators in Moscow probably got cold feet, and he realized he wasn't going to succeed. But the fact that he did what he did, got as far as he got, is a huge, huge problem for Putin, because Putin's strength comes from perception. And the perception now is that an 8,000 strong ragtag group of criminals can take over part of a country. That is something that Putin can't live with.
Yeah, and the fact that his army on the route from Ukraine through to Rostov-on-Don, which is basically the logistics hub for the Russian military effort in Ukraine, they just laid down their arms and all fled.
Well, they not only did that, some of them welcomed the Wagner mercenaries. And what we saw there is, we don't see opinion polls. We don't see how people actually feel about Putin right now, because it's a totalitarian regime. Anyone who says anything goes to jail. But what we saw right there and then this weekend is that Putin is not a popular guy, that someone like Prigozhin is a popular guy.
Well, we're always told, as you say, look, we don't have opinion polls, they don't have free media. The internet is incredibly controlled as well. A lot of people won't even be aware of what's really going on in Ukraine, or weren't even aware perhaps what was really going on on Saturday. But we're told, this Putin strongman, he saved Russia from chaos. People know he's corrupt, but what's the alternative? We've had chaos. We don't, a lot of people in Russia think that he is their savior, do they not? Or is that just the illusion that's put about?
That's just the spin. I mean, Russia has lost nearly 250,000 soldiers. Everybody's got a friend, a relative, an acquaintance, a son, a father, etc., who is dead from this war. And you can't, there's just no way to spin that. And we always thought that the mothers would be the ones to cause the downfall of the Putin regime. But the mothers have been too scared to go out because they don't want to be arrested. And so who is expressing the will of the people? This monstrous man, Prigozhin, the one who saw on the front line the cannon fodder, the destruction, the mutilation of young men for no reason. And he was the one who was saying, this should be fought differently, et cetera. Not for the reasons, not for human rights reasons, but whatever reasons. He was one saying this is just total incompetence, which is upsetting him. And so who would have thought that a criminal cook would be the one instead of the mothers? But he was the one who was like letting off the steam from all this anger that's built up among the Russian people.
But among the sort of jubilation, a lot of people feeling it was the beginning of the end for Vladimir Putin. If he'd not ousted this weekend, the curtain has been pulled back, and we now realise that actually he's much more fragile than many had thought. He doesn't have the army. He doesn't appear to have Prigozhin, Wagner Group, which he was happy to fund and help encourage as his backup in case the army turned against him. And yet. If he were ousted by Prigozhin, he put either himself in power or someone else in power that would do his bidding. You're looking at something much worse, possibly for Russia, and worse certainly for Ukraine. This man, it doesn't want the Ukraine war ended because of human rights violations. He's the one committing them. He wants a more brutal war. He'd be willing to use nuclear weapons, many fear.
Well, I mean, that's certainly what Putin wants everybody to believe, that if it wasn't him, he's the only reasonable man out there. But I don't see anything reasonable about Vladimir Putin. He took over parts of Georgia. He took over Ukraine. He's threatened nuclear war. He's carpet bombed Syria. I don't see how anyone else is any worse than Putin. What I would say is that I mean, and I'm in no way hoping that Prigozhin comes in, but Prigozhin in this particular case, a day before he went on his march, his rebellion, he was saying that this war is a fake war. This war was based on false pretexts. This war shouldn't be fought. It's all very stupid. And so I could imagine that whoever were to come in after Putin and would say, that was his war, that was his folly, that was his mistake, and we're not doing that. It's easy to sort of blame it on the other guy and then come back into the fold. I mean, there's a lot more money to be made for all these bandits and criminals not being at war. And this was the reason why Putin's at this war is he wanted to stay in power. And to be a dictator for 22 years, you need a foreign enemy. That's why he did it.
Indeed. And of course, the oligarchs who support Vladimir Putin because they're living high on the fat of that level of corruption from his regime, having all their assets being frozen around the world, are unable to travel freely. The wives can't go shopping, in London and Milan and Paris. That is an issue for them. They want their glamorous lives back.
They do. Although, having said that, if a new guy comes in, let's say Prigozhin had succeeded, he would have looked around at all the oligarchs and he would have rounded them all up and said, I'll take that, and that. Thank you very much. You're going to jail or you're dying. So I'm not sure the oligarchs are all in with Putin because at least that's the status quo. New guys come in, they're going to want to have all that money. But having said all that, I don't think that we should it's not really our place to determine who's in charge of Russia. It's our place to put an absolute iron barrier around that country so that they can't do the damage that they've already done to Ukraine and other places. Can
I just ask you, you were instrumental in providing the information. You've been calling for, a lot of these, they are corrupt oligarchs to have their money taken away and for Vladimir Putin and to face these sort of sanctions as well. You provide a lot of that information for those sanctions. There's a lot of talk of, while the Ukraine war is still ongoing, Putin's still in charge, those sanctions continue. Are they actually hitting hard enough? Because we know that those sanctions are certainly hitting the West. I mean, goodness me, we are paying the price of those sanctions in terms of oil and gas prices and all the impact that's been on the Western economies. Are they hitting the Russians?
Oh, my God, they're hitting the Russians. They're hitting them 100 times harder than they're hitting us. These guys are in absolute pain and agony. Like more than half of the Russian central bank reserves, their literal war chest is now frozen in Western central banks. The Russian government can't borrow any money anywhere in the world. The oligarchs have all their money frozen. They can't manufacture anything. Their planes are literally having to do emergency landings because they don't have parts. The sanctions are hitting them absolutely devastatingly hard. The only issue is that we've left, there's one elephant in the room, which is oil. They're selling oil and getting money from oil and using that money to kill Ukrainians. And so we kind of have to suck up our gut and go the final step, which is to stop buying their oil and not allowing anyone else to buy their oil. And if we do that, they would be broke. Yeah, time to tell the Indias and others, time to pick a side, your ours or theirs. And just finally, so you knew Vladimir Putin. You have to have security. Your lawyer for helping to expose corruption lost his life. You are constantly under threat from Vladimir Putin. We know the number of people who fall out of windows, mysterious heart attacks, poisonings. Anyone who crosses Vladimir Putin, Alexei Navalny in jail. I mean, looks like he's aged 30 years in a year in a terrible state in conditions in Russian jail. What are the chances of Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Wagner group leader, surviving? He's in Belarus. We understand his deal was brokered by the Belarusian president, who's known him for many, many years, and of course is propped up by Putin's regime and Putin's military. What are the chances of him making it, surviving generally, even till next Saturday? Because he basically called out Vladimir Putin. He has totally disrespected him online. He said he wanted to oust the president. He's been accused of treason. He doesn't survive this, does he? Well, in theory, he shouldn't have even survived the weekend. Putin hates disloyalty more than anything. And as you mentioned, a bunch of these cases, there was Litvinenko and the Skripals and so on and so forth. And so his natural reaction is, he would have liked to put him on Red Square and put him in a guillotine and chop his head off right then and there. But it seems to me that Prigozhin is almost too big to kill. He's running Russia's entire foreign policy in Africa. All of the countries in Africa that are loyal to Russia are loyal because of the Wagner mercenaries who are involved in 17 different military operations in Africa that are all reporting to Prigozhin, in addition to all the stuff he was doing in Ukraine. You know, Russia is so incompetent and they have such corruption. The one guy who is like making things happen for them is this guy Prigozhin. And I mean, he's a monster. He's a butcher. He's a terrible, terrible man. But he was a guy who was doing their stuff. And so to just get rid of him, it would have been chaos for Russia. And so I imagine that you know, Putin is just seething, trying to figure out how to deal with this humiliation, but at the same time having this guy who is really a key man for so much stuff he's got going on.
It's absolutely extraordinary, these two men, this battle for power, and indeed we all know it's the rubles that also finally count in the end, the billions and billions both men have stashed away. Fascinating to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time and expertise. Bill Browder, head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign.